I'm here together with Rudy Marsman, who's sitting in the same room as I am. So once he speaks, you will also see him popping up on screen. Without further ado, let us just continue. So indeed, for last time, I think that's also a nice bridge from your question, George. So last time we spoke more about Sigrid CI. We spoke more about how you can integrate it into your CI/CD pipeline. I don't know if you were there. If not, I can see if I can get you in contact with the expert on the Sigrid CI part. It was Michiel Kuipers. I'll see what I can do for that. In the meantime, if we have some answers to your questions, we'll also handle that here. That said, we spoke about Sigrid CI. Sigrid CI makes sure that you have the fastest feedback possible on the code changes that you have done in your application. It also means that there is a possibility, as you can see in the top right picture, for some peer review process based on what happened to your code. Did it improve? Did it decrease in quality? Are there any new security findings in there or not? Stuff like that. Once you have that objective view, once you have the information to base that peer review process on, and that's where the next step comes in, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is when are you done, right? I mean, there's always more you can do. You can always do better, but I mean, should you? And I think that's a relatively important question, since 5 stars is never the objective. At least that's how I usually see it. But before we get into that, briefly a recap, recap, I would say. So what we see often, there are different ways of managing your development environment, your development organization. There's a traditional top-down model where sometimes you have more the control from management, but development only executes. That means that even though you have the feeling of control, the developers may still want to do whatever they want. The model does not empower the developers, and eventually it leads to unhappy people and also a lower quality code. So you hire the developers to do whatever they do best, meaning the whole other end could be that you just leave them be as a manager and just make sure that they have all the freedom. But that means that it doesn't allow for any control. So on the left-hand side, you think you have control. On the right-hand side, you clearly don't. But both are not perfect. Both are not ideal in a situation like this. So this is where the middle comes in. This is where Sigrid comes in as the software assurance platform to support you in objective measurements. So objectively deciding what is technical debt, what is the security of your application, how is the architecture of your application. And then you leave up to the developers how they are going to implement it. So this is the white star that you see in the middle, more or less. It is the point where development, architects, program managers, product owners, CTOs, maybe even, everyone comes together. So everyone speaks the same language. Everyone knows at least the same basis, the same basic. So we're all using the same type of information to talk about. That allows you as management to exert some control, but it also empowers the developers to do whatever they are best at, namely developing code. But before we dive into whatever that then actually means, I think let's go with a first question. We have some questions prepared for you. For example, this one, and I think it would be interesting to know what you have as information for this. So, for example, the first question is, do you have any OKRs, KPIs, objectives for your software development? So we have 3 answers. And the answers show us a bit of a mixed picture. So we see that there is a 2 out of 3 that say, yes, we have that. We do have OKRs, KPIs, also specifically for code. And one person says, we do it basically mainly on company or business level. So it's nice to see that there are some people that already have the very specific code level objectives. I'm curious as to what those are. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but if you would want to share that in the chat, that would be nice. And maybe we can talk a bit about it if you'd like to share that. As for the people that answered no only on company or business level, I think this is a nice bridge to what we're going to talk about, or what Rudy is going to talk about. So with that said, I will give the word to him. And Rudy.
All right. So yeah, we just talked about goals. But of course, we allow you to set goals in Sigrid as well. But before we can get there, we need to have some clarification on exactly what objectives are in Sigrid, like what's the definition, and what it's used for. Well, quality objectives are quality goals, which are actionable and help prioritizing. They add business context, and they track progress. They are actionable because, sure, you want the software to be as maintainable as possible, but what does it mean? Like, where do I need to focus on? Where's the low-hanging fruit? And for instance, we generally advise to strive for a 4.0 maintainability rating, but that's just putting blankly a 4.0 in your target doesn't take into account any business context. So we also allow in Sigrid to add this context to set up the goals to make sure that there's not a paper reality, but that you actually set targets that are reasonable and actionable. Well, and lastly, you want to track the progress of the goals and see, one, am I moving in the right direction? And two, have I achieved my goals? Yes or no? And having these goals in Sigrid allows you to make sure everybody looks into the same numbers and make sure that there's no confusion about what the current situation is, the current status of the software that's being worked on.
Right. So yeah, I mean, in the light of what Rudy just shared, I think we have another question, as you can see on the screen. A question that I also want to show on screen is, so yeah, when is software good enough? When are you done? It's a very clear picture, I must say. It's a very clear picture. Everyone answered the same thing. It depends, as you can see here on screen. What does this tell us, Rudy?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, I kind of gave away the answer, but yeah, I think we all feel that there's no easy way of saying this is a target which applies for all the systems. So there are lots of factors that you take into account whenever you set a goal or target for any system. Where do you focus on? Where do you put your attention in? Like as grandma used to say, you can only spend your money once, so better spend it wisely. Same applies for time. Like you don't want to spend your time refactoring a system of which you know that next year is gonna go out of service anyway. So in order to make sure that this business context is taken into account, Sigrid allows to submit metadata of a system, which we use to set goals. I will go quickly through all of them. It's kind of a wall of text. Don't worry, you don't have to read it all. This is also available in the wiki page we have online. But yeah, pretty much there are four essential aspects of software which we believe are helpful to help you set targets. First of all, business criticality. How important is this software in your daily business? I mean, if you're a bank and you have a piece of software that manages all the transactions for billions of dollars, I'd say it's a critical system. You don't want to have any mistakes in the logic. Are we talking about a little service that sends emails whenever an employee has his birthday? Well, it's a nice to have, but it's low. It isn't really valuable for your business, right? So that's something where you could say nice to have, but don't spend too much time on maintainability. Or we have deployment type, which is actually used to assess the risk categories, for instance, for the risks in open source health, the vulnerabilities in your open source code. You can imagine a system connected to the internet can't really have any known vulnerabilities because it's being scanned by who knows who. But if you have a system that's physically separated from all networks and only accessible from your office environment, well, in that case, there is something to say. There's an argument to make that you don't want to put too much effort in making sure that any vulnerabilities are fixed, because nobody can access it anyway. Lifecycle phase, lastly, is also an important factor. System in initial development, a new system which you're going to build from scratch. It's like building a house. Like you want to make sure the foundation is solid, and you want to put a little bit of extra effort in it to make sure that any consecutive construction really adds up and doesn't experience any hinder from technical debt. If you have an end of life system where you know you're going to do the bare minimum and it's going to go offline in 1 or 2 years, you might say, well, let's just keep the current maintainability. If we can improve it, it's nice to have, but we're not going to invest anything in improving the maintainability. And this also helps you when, so for instance, a new person comes into your company, opens the Sigrid dashboard, sees one system in red in terms of maintainability. By looking into the goal, saying, oh, but we already set a goal for 2.8 or I don't know what number, then it's immediately clear that there's nothing to worry about and no action should really be undertaken to address this would-be issue.
Yeah, so that leaves us with a question, right? When do you set goals? I mean, we set the metadata. We talked about objectives in general, what it means and what makes sense to set. But when do you do that? Is that maybe really at the start for requirements engineering, or together with your team, or maybe closing to the end when you want to test to make sure that everything's all right? Right. Yeah. So indeed, yeah. What we see is it's not a tie because we're an uneven voters group, but yeah.
I'd say yeah. Like there, two answers have been given. One is whenever we start requirements engineering, which is correct. You can never start too early with thinking about what am I going to build, what are the risks, where do I want to be, what is my budget, how's my team made of. But also the second one, it's sort of consists of two parts. One is at the start of development, which is correct, but there's also a very important part saying together with the development team, because typically management doesn't know the technical ins and outs of how much effort it would take to fix issues or to refactor software. I think every product owner, every manager, every developer has had the discussion: should we focus on functionality or technical debt? It's an ongoing discussion. So yeah, to have discussions on setting goals together with development teams is really recommended. But even though the advice is to set the goals as early as possible, doesn't mean that it's too late once the system is already live to still set goals. If you're an application manager and you're being put in charge of a system that's like 20 years old, that still means that you can set goals for the specific system, namely how much time do you spend on refactoring technical debt that has been growing for the past 20 years. Maybe the system is connected to the internet now and wasn't 10 years ago. So now you have changed your goals for instance, for security. So it pretty much, depending on your stage, you can think of what goals do I set? Do I change my goals? Do I have any new insights? Maybe if you have a new system, you could say, well, let's keep the rating as high as possible for as long as we can. And every time I drop below a certain threshold, I want to have a discussion again on how much budget we can take to either address the technical debt or just keep going as is. It's really, you can be really flexible, but because the goals are set in a common platform, you can sort of avoid any discussions on what did we discuss again, or why did we change this, or anything remotely like that. We've just currently talked about how, like, what are goals and what could you use to set them and when can you set them, but we can also just show you. So what we're currently looking at is an example of a demo portfolio. It's an open demo consisting of several open source systems, and this is the default landing page which you land on. It rates your portfolio by risk, but we're currently interested in rating by objective completeness. If I open this tab, immediately the picture changes. So what you can see on the left-hand side of the screen is that the maintainability tab is encircled in white, showing that 11 of the systems in here out of the 45 have met none of the objectives set in terms of maintainability. You can also select other targets or other goals that have been set. So, for instance, security. Okay, what immediately catches your eye is that where are all the systems? For only 3 of the systems, any targets have been set in terms of security, compared to pretty much all of them for maintainability. It also shows you that 2 of them have met all their goals, and one of them hasn't. Well, you can also do the same for open source health, which is to scan on your open source vulnerabilities compared to security, which also scans your manually written risks. And there are other aspects that we measure, such as reliability, cloud readiness, and architecture. So let's go to maintainability, just as a random one, and scroll down. You can group the graph below based on the metadata. And this is why it's so important to set this in your upload or in your configuration when you upload the system to SRG. So currently I'm grouping all the systems on lifecycle phase. And well, what do we see here? Microsoft Terminal is a system in a lifecycle phase, initial development. So it should be a new system. Okay, so why is a new system so big and still in the lifecycle phase new? It might be an indication that the metadata doesn't really work. But let's look into what we're seeing here. This is a quality overview as is, just the maintainability rating, the security rating, the open source health. Scrolling slowly down. And here you can see the metadata that has been filled in. So we know that this is not a very important system. The business criticality is low. The deployment type is physical, so there's no remote access to the system. And yeah, the lifecycle phase is initial development. So okay, let's assume that this is a system that's in the end of life phase or in the servicing and maintenance phase. We can see that the maintainability rating has been set to 3.0 or higher, and the test code ratio has been set to 20% or higher. And open source health vulnerabilities allow only low risks or lower. So basically, just the lowest risk category is allowed. 1 second.
There was a question from Vincent about the overview, but Vincent, maybe we can answer the question once we get back to the overview page again. If you want to finish your story, we'll get back to you, Vincent.
Yeah. So currently, I'm setting the snapshot dates to compare the year to date. Okay. So I randomly picked an example here. So what we can see is that there's no delta in maintainability, no delta in the test code ratio, and no delta in open source health. So we know we don't achieve our target, and we haven't been inching closer towards our target for the past year on neither maintainability rating or test code ratio. This is something you could address. Maybe the team hasn't gotten enough time for it. Maybe something wrong with the measurement. Maybe the target isn't realistic. For instance, the technology doesn't allow for test code ratio, and someone set the target without knowing the context. By having this overview, it sort of makes it easier for everybody who is somewhat invested in the system to look into the same numbers and make sure everybody's on the same page. So let's go back to the overview because it has been requested.
Yeah, so the question was, I'm trying to find it again. So the overview does show how many systems do not meet the objective, but can we see how about systems that have no objective set? Is that also in there? I think it's a very good question.
Yeah. If there are no objectives whatsoever, then the system is not shown here.
So what it means, Vincent, is that whenever you go to the rate by objective completeness here for maintainability, you see there's 45 systems showing up. And if we go to, for example, security as the other example, we see that there is only 3, meaning that for the rest of these systems, there has been no objectives set on this particular aspect.
Yeah.
It's not really visible, but it's there, so you can see it. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so this is a way to filter the systems based on specific targets, but you're still able to scroll down and look into all the systems that are in the monitor, and you have the same information here, but this is just more clustered on what targets have been met, what volume is the system, what's the system name, and it allows you to quickly scroll through the overview here and check what's red, what's green, and so Elasticsearch. Why is the maintainability 2.5? Let's take a look. We're still looking into the past year, and again, no delta here. Yeah, so this is pretty much in a nutshell how you can look into the goals. But for instance, what if you want to add a new goal, or what if you want to change something? The test code ratio has been set on 30%. We're currently at 68. Maybe we've discussed in the team that we want to achieve a 75% test code ratio in the future. You can just easily save the new objective. And now you can see that only 25% of the targets has been met, because the test code ratio is now no longer in compliance with the target that has been set.
So maybe another question, if you think about the objectives overview that we had, the completeness, if you can go there. I mean, we talked about the criticality of systems, for example, for security. Can you show me some examples there, if you maybe play around a bit with that? I mean,
yeah, let's do open source health.
Fine as well. Yeah. We have a lot of systems here. I mean, there's a lot of things that are in the red, but where should I start? Right? What should I do first? I mean, I can't do everything.
Yeah. Okay. First thing that comes to mind is unknown. I've sorted this list on deployment type, and we don't know for sure if MariaDB server is connected to the internet, or if it's a local program, or so it means it's hard to assess what risk the systems falls into. And secondly, the advice would be in terms of security to also take into account the deployment type. Deployment type shows, as I said before, if it's connected to the internet. So these ones who show up in red in this category could be interesting to take a look at first. Same goes for business criticality. But also wager that high critical business functions are more important to make sure aren't vulnerable in terms of risks than other systems, and shows that out of the 5 critical systems in the portfolio, only Puppet meets the objectives for open source health. And weirdly, the less important systems are, at a glance of it, better secure than the other ones. Okay, well, maybe we can answer your question, George, on the feedback. You've integrated Sigrid with Azure DevOps, and when you run a build pipeline on a feature branch, you don't get specific feedback on what's changing in regarding duplication, unit size, etc. You only get the star rating, but not exactly what the refactor candidates are. You can get this feedback. First of all, we've have a new feature which will be released probably next week. It has been fixed, and where it doesn't just show you the raw number of stars for each of your metrics, but also if it has been an improvement or a degradation of quality. But furthermore, you can also look into your output folder in Sigrid CI, which by default is called Sigrid-CI-output. you should find an HTML report there, which shows you for each function what functions have been for each file, which functions have been changed and what rules have been changed and what the impact is on the change. I will share a link to what is Azure DevOps. I will share you a link on the documentation on exactly how to configure this. But yeah, I mean, I assume you're using the SQR logging in the pull request, like in the console.
We do have an example, by the way, which I can share. I don't know if you're in the documentation. If you go to the Team City part.
No, I'm not. If you can.
I can share my screen. Yes. As you can see, we didn't prepare this particular question. But so I'm in the Sigrid documentation. This is something that's publicly available. You can also find it from within Sigrid, or if you just Google for it, you'll find it as well. For the Sigrid CI integration, pipeline integration, we have for each of these environments and other environments some options. We talked about that last time in a bit more depth together with our expert Michiel Kuipers. What I can show you now is not a live example, but from the documentation, how you can set it up. I mean, I'm going to scroll over it, but then once you're there, you get some output. And in the outputs, you have the feedback also to watch what files have a certain impact on the maintainability, or in this case, the maintainability rating. So we're looking at, for example, module coupling for this particular thing where this file has been changed. Although now I'm looking at it, it is a bit of a dated screenshot, so there's also a plus or a minus to it currently.
Yeah, and the fifth row from the bottom, that HTML file that has been linked to here shows you a bit more detail than is just shown in this.
Yes, yeah. So there's a bit more detail also to what you see here. The documentation is a bit outdated, I must say, but that's I mean, we're just humans.
Can you scroll down a bit more?
Yes, I can, of course.
Yeah. So there's more to it than has been shown here.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, George, but if not, please do let me know, or maybe I can connect you to our expert Michiel, so you can have a chat about that if you would like to be if you're open to that. Then let's see if we can connect you to. I don't know if there are no more questions at this point. What I can do is I have a few more slides to share. Please, if you have any questions in the meantime, do stop me from talking. Okay, yes, there are. So Maurice asks, to improve the quality, we first worked on increasing the quality awareness. Yeah, makes sense. We want to check if new added code is meeting our objectives. In the context of Sigrid, new code is about new files, and we would like to focus on new added methods in general. What options do we have? I think on the Delta quality tab, there's something that we can show them.
So yeah, there's let me just open a random system, TensorFlow. And if you go to the maintainability tab and then to Delta quality. So what you said about the awareness on adding new files is found in the new code quality. And if you want to see what is the impact of changes I made in either existing functions or new methods in general, you could find this in the change code quality. So this shows you every class that has been changed, and then whether this the changes in this specific class have been an improvement or degradation in the quality. So in this example, the variable scope.py saw a decrease in duplication, but the unit size improved for this specific file. And you can also open it in the Code Explorer to give you a bit more insight in exactly which methods are there in this specific class.
In a specific change, as well, right? Right, so indeed, closing in at 5. Let me wrap this up. I'll take over the screen. For example, what I can still share you is we discussed today a lot of stuff about Sigrid, about onboarding, and about setting metadata. And more of that information you can actually find in the documentation as well. I briefly showed it, for example, on the Sigrid CI part, but there's more to it. For example, on how to set objectives, if you want to reread whatever we handled and whatever we discussed today. Well, that said, I don't want to keep you any longer. If there's no more questions, do feel free to reach out if you feel like it later on. Yeah, that's that. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your questions that have been there. I hope it was valuable, and see you anytime soon.